Yo, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy channel, and in today's video I have a little fantasy football trade review to show you guys. This is in a 12-team non-PPR league where I was really desperate for a tight end, and I was able to make a really smart trade, in my opinion, to acquire a nice tight end to fit in my roster. We are heading into week 3 of the 2021 fantasy football season, and we're just going to jump right into the trade here. So without further ado, let's look at this trade. So I was able to get Mark Andrews, tight end for the Baltimore Ravens, in exchange for giving away Courtland Sutton, wide receiver for the Denver Broncos, and tight end Austin Hooper of the Cleveland Browns. Now, I just picked up Austin Hooper today off the waiver wire for free, but he's kind of been a nice little waiver wire addition. As you can see, he's owned in about a third of NFL.com leagues. He's seeing a decent amount of targets. What you guys have to remember is the tight end position is pretty weak, so even getting 5 targets for 40 yards as a tight end, that you could do a lot worse than that. So Austin Hooper was a guy that I thought about plugging into my lineup moving forward, seeing what happens with him, because in week 1 in this non-PPR league, I played Ertz, who had 3.4 fantasy points. He had 34 yards. And then in week 2, I picked up Adam Troutman, played him, and he gave me a goose egg. And I was still able to win in week 2. But I don't want to have my tight ends combining for like 3 points over 2 weeks. So I thought Hooper was going to be my savior, hopefully. But I was able to make this trade for Mark Andrews. Now, if you take a look at the tight end rankings heading into the 2021 season, so that's what this is. This was posted on September 9th on Fantasy Pros. You got the big 3, Kelsey, Waller, Kittle. Mark Andrews was 4th, Hawkinson 5th. You got Pitts, Tanyan, Fant. So you can kind of see the list right here. As of today, I would have this big 3 ahead of Andrews still. I would put Hawkinson above Andrews. He's just been more involved. He's just had better weeks than Andrews so far. And I will go over Mark Andrews' production through 2 weeks, and I'll give a little synopsis of what I think about him moving forward. But I put Hawkinson above Andrews. Pitts and Andrews are kind of in that same range. Gronk was all the way down here. You have to move him kind of into that same range after having 2 touchdowns in each of the first 2 weeks, having some big games. But to me, Mark Andrews is still obviously a tight end 1, even though he hasn't had the best start to the season for him. He's shown in the past that he has big game upside. He's had multi-touchdown games. He can explode at any given point. So to me, a tight end getting 2 points versus 5 points isn't that big of a deal breaker for me, but having a tight end who can go out there and get in the end zone a time or two while putting up some decent yardage, that's what Mark Andrews represents for me. So yeah, to me, he's still in that upper tight end 1 area, just not like not a top 3 tight end. But we'll take a look at what Mark Andrews has done so far. Week 1, he had 20 yards. Week 2, he had 57 yards on 5 targets. So for me, hey man, if he does something like that every week, I'll be happy. But like I said, he's shown in the past to have really, really big games. Austin Hooper, like I said, we already looked at his stats, but this is what he's done through 2 weeks. I just got him off the waiver wire. And I did also include Courtland Sutton in this trade, who he wasn't very involved in week 1. He's coming off of that injury from the 2020 football season. But week 2, now that Jerry Jeudy is out against Jacksonville, he was able to put up 159 yards. He had 12 targets, caught 9 of them. So he was looking really good. I like Courtland Sutton moving forward. Obviously, this was a weak opponent with Jacksonville. Jerry Jeudy looks like he's going to come back eventually. So we'll have to see how Courtland Sutton performs against better defenses and once Jerry Jeudy comes back. But this was by no means someone that I was hoping to get rid of, but I really had good wide receiver depth, which is something I will go over also in a second to give you some context to the trade, because that's what I like to do in these videos, kind of give you some context so that even if you're not making this exact trade, maybe you can make a similar trade in your league. And just to give you some more context, I was able to get Courtland Sutton in the 7th round, and then also, just to kind of brag a little bit, Antonio Brown in the 8th, and then in the 9th round, Deebo Samuel. So that 7th to 9th round, I got 3 really, really nice wide receivers that could make a case for starting. So taking a look at my team here, just to give you an idea of why I wanted to make a trade like this. Obviously, I was weak at tight end, but I was strong at wide receiver, like I was saying. I already drafted DJ Moore and Calvin really early. And then in the flex, I was cycling guys like Deebo Samuel, Antonio Brown, Courtland Sutton would have been an option moving forward after that big week 2 game. I also have Mike Davis if I need him to put in the flex. So I had a lot of depth at wide receiver and not a lot at tight end. So since I was able to get guys like Sutton, Deebo, and Antonio Brown late, they kind of became expendable. I could have also thought about dealing DJ Moore or Calvin Ridley in a different type of trade package to maybe get one of those upper tier tight ends like a Kelsey or a Darren Waller. But I was able to just get rid of one of those guys. I was kind of on my bench in Courtland Sutton. With the depth I have, I just kind of figured I'm better off shipping him off, even though I like Courtland Sutton, shipping him off and getting a position of need. And to me, this was just really good value in getting Mark Andrews. Also, when you guys are making fantasy football trades, it is also important to note the opponent or the league mate of yours, let's call it, that you are trading with. So taking a look at his team, he did have Mark Andrews at tight end, but if you look at his flex right now, he's got Michael Carter in there. Jarvis Landry just went on IR. His other options would have been Jalen Reagor, Michael Pittman, Russell Gage, Sony Michel. So he was really in need of some depth where, you know, I have a very deep team, but I had a starting position of need. He really needs some depth, so he has someone to put in the flex because Michael Carter really is just not going to cut it. So I was able to give him Courtland Sutton, who projects to be a quality fantasy player moving forward. Plus, I threw in a tight end who has some value, some relevance, so that he will be able to have someone to play in that tight end spot. So every trade, it kind of just depends on what each team needs. I wasn't sure if he was willing to downgrade from Mark Andrews to Austin Hooper, if getting Courtland Sutton was worth it. But for this fantasy manager's team, he thought it was worth it. Also, one more thing to note here is I was kind of carrying 2 tight ends. I even had 3 tight ends in the preseason because I was really trying to see who I could play at that position. But now that I have a locked and loaded Mark Andrews, I have Zach Ertz on this reserve spot because he's on the COVID list. What I'm going to do now is put Jeff Wilson there, who I just picked up today. So I can I put Jeff Wilson on the reserve? There we go. Yes, I can. I'll put him there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop Zach Ertz because I no longer really need him. So we will go ahead and drop Ertz from the team, and then boom. And then now, as you can see, since I made a 2-for-1 trade, I already had an available roster spot, which is another bonus of when you're getting rid of 2 players and getting 1 in return. That means you have a spot available to add from the waiver wire. And since I put Jeff Wilson on the reserve spot and then dropped Zach Ertz, who was previously in that spot, that means I have an additional reserve or an additional bench spot. So now I can add 2 more players from the waiver wire, which is huge. So today, I think I added Jeff Wilson, I added Austin Hooper, and I also picked up Justin Fields, who's going to be starting. So I do have Tom Brady, but I just picked him up just in case against Cleveland. If he has a big game, he's kind of like the new hotness. He's a young rookie quarterback who has some mobility. So if he goes crazy, I can then trade him away to a quarterback needy team in my league. But let's go ahead and take a look at what players are available. This is a 12-team league. We have pretty deep benches, so there's not a ton available right now. Honestly, as you can see, the options are very thin here on our waiver wire. So I'm just going to go ahead and add Elijah Moore just in case the young player does have a breakout sometime soon. But I'm not really banking on it, but you might as well just add a player to the team just in case something were to happen. Another player I could add would maybe be Rashad Bateman, who is currently on IR. I could have him on my bench, and I could always cut him whenever needed. And then I could maybe even throw him on my reserve spot once Antonio Brown is off the COVID list. But I think what I'm actually going to do, just because there's really no one that I love, is I'm going to add, okay, that's not how you spell his name apparently. I think it's Damian. There we go. I'm going to add Damian Williams. He's the backup running back in Chicago. I do have David Montgomery. So just in case something happens to David Montgomery, I'll add him to the bench. But it's really not super important. I could cut him at any time. I could cut Elijah Moore at any time. But it is better to use your bench spots. Even if there's no one that you really love, you might as well throw someone on there and just see what happens. So yeah, guys, that's going to do it for this video. Just a quick little trade review for you guys where I was able to get a tight end, a position of need, which I'm sure is also a position of need for many of you out there who did not get lucky in the draft with a tight end or spend up on one of those big elite tight ends. But moving forward, I expect Mark Andrews to be a solid tight end. Tight end is a weak position. So even though I think Mark Andrews will have some poor games, which he hasn't had a hot start to the season, but I also expect him to have plenty of good, useful games for fantasy moving forward. And like I said, tight end is a weak position. So unless you have one of those really, really elite guys, you should expect your tight end to disappear once in a while, not have crazy games. But he has upside every week to get in the end zone. So to me, I will take this. I would as long as, like I said, through weeks 1 and 2, my tight end scored a combined 3.5 points. So that's just not going to cut it. So hopefully Andrews can do better than that. But yeah, that's going to do it for this video, guys. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it. Make sure to drop a like, subscribe to the channel. I'll talk to you later. Peace out.